You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to today's episode of Autumn on the Air. We're diving deep into the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, also known as MEP, and the MEP National Network, a remarkable public-private partnership that has been a pillar of U.S. manufacturing. The MEP National Network offers comprehensive solutions to manufacturers across the country, fueling growth and innovation in the sector. Today, I'm thrilled to have two experts with us for this discussion, Nagesh Rao and David McFeeter. Nagesh Rao is the Acting Director of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership at NIST, with over 25 years of experience in public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Previously, he served as Chief Information Officer for the Bureau of Industry and Security at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Nagesh has co-developed federal initiatives like I-6 Green and Patents for Humanity, led SBA's digital modernization efforts, and spearheaded technology direction during the COVID-19 response. He holds multiple advanced degrees, a patent bar license, and has received numerous accolades for his contributions to innovation and public service. David McFeeter is a commercialization and business development executive with over 25 years of experience at MIT, NASA-RTTC, Intel, and his own firm. He currently manages a manufacturing extension partnership grant, engaging small manufacturers with the Manufacturing USA Institutes. David has reviewed numerous commercialization plans and founded two companies. He has established strategic R&D partnerships with organizations like the U.S. Air Force, NASA, and NIST, and was awarded the Federal Lab Consortium's Outstanding Service Award in 2008. Welcome, David and Nagesh. So excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks. You. Excited.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about, especially about MEPs. And I thought maybe the best place to start off with was with a little bit of background. And so, Nagesh, I know you've had a diverse and amazing career across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Tell us a little bit about how your backgrounds influenced your approach to leading the MEP and fostering innovation within the manufacturing sector.
Sure. No, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm really thrilled to talk to you all. And funny enough, I'm familiar with the Association of University Technology Managers, right? That's what Autumn is?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. So what most of you don't know is I started my career in technology transfer and commercialization back in 2002 at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I was fresh out of college with my degree in materials engineering. So I had experience and understanding of the manufacturing background from a materials engineering perspective, especially in biomaterials and semiconductor manufacturing studies. But I worked in tech transfer at RPI under Chuck Rancourt at the time. And so I'm very familiar with the notion of how do you spin off viable basic science and technology R&D coming out of a university's professional, lab into the marketplace, into a viable, potential commercializable product, whether it's licensing said invention or allowing for a startup or small business to grow as a result of that intellectual property that is emerging from that lab. So for me, coming to the MEP program in 2023, many, many years later, was kind of that full journey circle of my career, starting off in engineering, working at the nexus of engineering and intellectual property law back in 2002, 2003 era of time, working in public policy, moving into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and then working in industry and working in the national security space, and then finalizing myself back at MEP, where I'm looking at that nexus as a policymaker and programmatic supporter of how do I ensure good evidence-based policy decision-making at the federal level to support small and medium-sized manufacturers whether it's a startup or a small business working at that nexus of manufacturing. And it was a critical juncture point for me of how critical and important manufacturing was to the American economy and also to the global economy when we went through the pandemic. I was at the time at the Small Business Administration helping. I had done a career pivot into IT management at that time, and I kind of got thrown into the mix with developing the cloud and technology solutions for SBA to push forth on fast tracking whatever we could with the PPP Paycheck Protection Program and economic injury disaster loan programs. There was the technology side to that, and I had to do a lot of technology architecting to get those platforms up and running quickly for folks. And as I was working on that issue from SBA's vantage point during the pandemic, I saw a lot of things pop up around our supply chain, and I saw things pop up around our manufacturing capabilities and what we were able to do and what we couldn't do. And that really started to resonate further with me after the pandemic, during the pandemic, when I moved over to be the CIO for the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is the national security export controls arm of commerce, and watching supply chain and our supply chain promise, be challenged in the way it was during the pandemic. And it was just kind of a natural maturation of time for me to find myself over at MEP and say, from my experiences in the past, starting 20 plus years ago in tech transfer, working in public policy, working for manufacturing companies, including a textile manufacturing company out of Sri Lanka, and then back in government policy work and IT management, and just seeing that, at the end of the day, for us to be competitive economically and from a national security perspective, we have to have, as part of our tools in the toolkit, a robust manufacturing scene, and the ability to manufacture, the ability to be self-sufficient, to create and not be reliant on single points of failure, and be able to do it ourselves to enable a robust, resilient framework that in turn feeds into our economic and global security prosperity. It's a long-winded answer of that's how I found my way over there.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. And I'm curious, from all this experience that you have, what do you think are some of the most significant challenges that manufacturers face today in keeping up with all the different technological advancements?
Technology changes rapidly.
Yeah, very.
And here's the thing. Software is now the critical point of all things now. Any company, whether you're a technical company or a non-technical company, manufacturing company or a non-manufacturing company, everything runs on software these days. It is pervasive. You cannot be competitive. You cannot have an equal footing in the playing field if you are not if you're not relying on some sort of software backbone to how you do your business. It is just more and more there, and it falls under the nexus of technology innovation. But I think some of the challenges is how to pivot and learn to adapt in a very rapidly changing world. During the pandemic, and I use software as an example, we saw 10 plus years of maturation in the IT industry during that period of the pandemic, because so many changes were happening all at once at a global level. And those who were prepared and could adapt and adopt technology solutions were able to thrive and survive through the pandemic, where those who did not couldn't. I think the other thing too is workforce. We have an everlasting need for smart, technical, trained workforce. There's more manufacturing jobs out there than there are people to fill those jobs. And we've got to get people into that technical skill mindset of wanting to think manufacturing is cool and sexy, but more importantly, wanting to embrace a career in manufacturing and being a manufacturer. I was recently at the Maryland MEP capstone design program that they have for interns going through to do an intern stint at a manufacturing company for the summer. And the program started as for Maryland MEP is just something they do with College Park out of Maryland College Park. In the Genesis days back years ago. Now it's across the country. They get folks from all over the U.S. from different universities coming to intern at Maryland for the summer for a client or a company that's serviced by the Maryland MEP. And it was amazing to see all those new aspiring makers and doers and entrepreneurial spirits in play, embracing a career in manufacturing that they never thought was possible.
So, David, I want to turn to you now because your work has spanned across major institutions like MIT and NASA, as well as several of your own ventures. Tell us how you see the role of MEP in helping small and medium-sized manufacturers navigate these challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, so SMMs have, small and medium manufacturers have a lot to do to keep the lights on a daily basis. They're the workhorse of the U.S. economy, but their focus, again, is on payroll and growth, and there can be a blind spot on how to make the company work smoother. MEP has a 30-plus year history of working to be the trusted advisor to help introduce and, more importantly, implement operationally advantageous solution. The key is they meet these manufacturers wherever they are. As Nagesh was noting, there's a whole new world that's opening up out there, this space of Industry 4.0. But there are a lot of manufacturers that are sort of still stuck in, Industry 1.0. So those people need to be moved through the entire process. And that takes time, that takes patience, that takes skilled navigators, Sherpas, harbor pilots to move them from one point to the other.
So let's talk a little bit about collaboration and build on what you just mentioned. How does the MEP network engage with universities and research institutions to ensure that new technologies make their way from the lab to the production floor?
So interestingly, about a third of all state-run MEP centers are based at universities. So some of those have a more direct connection. But of course, academic institutions and other research institutes are the developers of new technology, very early stage. So traditionally, MEP will work with manufacturers to implement proven solutions. I do think, however, there are two key roles for small manufacturers in this space. First, I have personally worked with institutes to help bring in small manufacturers to help them understand better how their new innovations actually might be created, or provide key elements, foundational points of interest to be able to have those technologies be successful. And that could be anything from a new form of heat exchanger, or it could be a new material that wasn't readily available, or a new method of manufacturing. But I think that second, and this is the larger opportunity that is out there, and I think relatively untapped, is that universities, as well as federal labs and Manufacturing USA institutes, have stakeholders, research partners, licensees, and the federal labs have creative partners. These individuals or companies are small manufacturers often in themselves, or they're large companies with subcontractors. Those individuals are undoubtedly doing new things with these new technologies. And within that is going to be some form of impasse, problem, hurdle that needs to be overcome. MEP is perfectly positioned to be able to work with those companies to help them overcome those hurdles on a regular basis or as an ad hoc basis. There's a program that I'm running with two colleagues within the MEP service called the MEP Advanced Technology Team. And this is really our sole purpose, being able to find companies they're trying to do new things in new ways and help them overcome that particular problem, hurdle, concern through partnership with other institutions or vendors that may have solutions to help them on a regular basis.
How do people get in contact with you then, David? How does that work? Since you're a connector, how do people get connected with you?
So there's two general ways. It's either through networking that is being done through the MEP Advanced Technology Team, or we get more often referrals from the MEP network itself. So MEP has a great website. Every state has their own center. They're the right people to start with all of your conversations. And then from there, they'll be able to triage the issues that you have and be able to move you into the right silo for appropriate work. And MEP has a full scope of services they provide to small and medium manufacturers. Everything from supplier scouting all the way through succession planning. So, and in the middle is the core service of lean process management.
Yeah, it's really broad-based based on how you just described it. So Nagesh, I want to turn back to you for a second. And given all your experience in spearheading federal initiatives, how does the MEP network support tech transfer efforts within the manufacturing sector? And what role do you see for tech transfer professionals in this ecosystem?
Sure. It's important to understand that MEP National Network is a network of networks within a greater network of innovation ecosystems across the United States. As David mentioned, a third, right? So 17 of our 51 centers are university-based, which is really nice. To be able to tap into the university diaspora that is out there for growing and intellectually building all these viable business solutions for manufacturers. The MEP business solution examples include food industry services, ISO and quality management, business growth services, cybersecurity, risk mitigation, sustainability, supplier chain, scouting, lean, Toyota, Kata, industry 4.0, workforce development, exporting, reshoring, and more. Right? Think of an MEP center is a hub of excellence for a company that is in the business of manufacturing. Your economic bottom line is you're manufacturing a good or service, and you're looking to monetize that and build forward a revenue stream for your company, small or medium-sized company. MEP centers play their role in helping do some risk mitigation. You as a small business or a medium-sized company have a gazillion priorities to worry about. And it is hard to compete with the primes that, the major conglomerates or industry companies effectively, in some of these manufacturing spaces, or to even be competitive and meet your revenue bottom line. So I akin, if you think about small business administration, small business development centers, or their growth accelerators, which I used to help out with when I was at SBA, or the MEP centers, or the EDA, Economic Development Administration, tech hubs, those are all innovation ecosystem hubs of excellence that are centers of excellence that are helping do some risk mitigation and provide a resource for small, medium-sized manufacturers, private industry, to be able to do their things and be competitive in the process while mitigating those risks. And I think from a technology transfer perspective, going to your part of your question, it is a logical nexus point of helping identify, potential solutions or options or capabilities that you may not have thought about, or creative outlets of engagement. Again, a third of the MEP centers are university-based, so they are probably, they are generally speaking, having worked in a university tech transfer house at RPI, which was also the house for one of the first original MEP centers when it came into existence 35 years ago, was at RPI. They were working in concert with, a university's intellectual property office or a university's tech transfer office or commercialization office. So there's that natural cross-pollination and cross-collaboration that's going to happen. And what makes the MEP program unique is we crafted it as a national network so that if you're a small business manufacturer, let's say out of Idaho, and you're looking for an innovative solution to get help with on your manufacturing company, you can tap into the network. You don't have to go work through your Idaho MEP. The Idaho MEP center director can say, hey, I think there might be an innovative solution over at the Purdue MEP Center, which is a university-based example of an MEP center, or TMAC, which is also housed at UT Arlington, right? Those are two university-based centers. And say, we can't help you, but they might be able to help you. And oh, by the way, they're partnering up with their university tech transfer commercialization offices. So there might be a viable intellectual property technology products coming out of the university lab that you might want to latch onto and license or utilize for your competitive advantage for your company. And in the case of NIST, what we're trying to do with the Matter Plus program that David has helped out with from his vantage point too, is try to figure out those technology commercialization pathways and transfer pathways so that even the federal grown science and technology that's coming out of the federal labs can have a chance at being used in an applied commercialized business perspective and not just technology that sits on the shelf not being used at all.
So speaking of tech transfer, which we've been talking about a little bit here, the relationship between manufacturing and research is often a very delicate balance. And I'm curious, David, how do you navigate the often complex dynamics between academia and industry to make sure that these partnerships not only are productive, but they're also mutually beneficial?
It's always a challenge because there are people involved and they all have their own separate mission. So the key thing, it's 3 C's: communication, culture, and make sure that you have good contact. It's challenging sometimes to get things started because people are operating at sort of different timescales. It's not always the institution that is the person not returning phone calls. I think it's the responsibility of the facilitator, the go-between, the catalyst, like we are, to be able to make sure that the meetings are scheduled, that people are hearing what's being said, and that the messages are being received as intended. So as a good, outside third party watching the situation happen with a vested interest in success, the MEP program is actually in the perfect situation because our goal is to have the company have a successful engagement with the institution. And if it's not going well, then we have the opportunity of trying to figure out if there's a way to salvage it or if there's some other alternative that needs to be taken. Just recently, and this didn't involve a university, but it was 2 companies. But these conversations and these problems happen all the time. I don't think that cultural mismatches are limited between between commercial firms and institutions. There's always people involved. They always have cross purposes. One person's buying, one person's selling. Even in a collaborative research environment, it's important to just make sure that everyone knows where it's going. The main problem is time. Things take a lot longer than you think that they should. I recently just completed a creative that took a full year. And as I look back, it was just a lot of little things all along the way. And it was a strong push on my part to sort of like get people to respond at different times. And, there was no blame being tossed around. It would have been nice if it had, taken 4 months, 5 months, 6 months less.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like you said, sometimes those little things add up and time goes by so quickly. So, and David, I wanted to ask you, because I know you've been involved and very instrumental in establishing R&D partnerships with various federal labs. Can you share an example or two of a successful partnership that led to a significant advancement in manufacturing technology?
Well, the program that we've been working on is relatively new. So I can't, some of the outputs are not completely well known yet, but I'll pick on a couple of really good ones. One in particular that we brought to bear to the NIST laboratories. There was some research or some experimentation that had been going on in the commercial sector about using 3D printed plastic parts to serve as forms for metal press brakes. So that's just pressing a thin piece of metal in a form in order to make a new part. You see that a lot. You see the rolling version of that when people make continuous gutter systems. So the question was, is there a faster, easier way to make these parts without having to go to tool steel, which was, again, during COVID, was always expensive and was taking a lot of time, whereas 3D printing could be done right away. So there's just a bunch of questions that had not been answered yet. What sort of plastic should you use? What's the processing of the plastic? What sort of forms or features would be appropriate to try? What grade of metal would be appropriate to bend on these things? How many times can you hit the form before it degrades? What is the appropriate use for these types of products? All of these questions were posed to the NIST research labs focused on materials and 3D printing, and they went through a number of early stage experimentation. They're research scientists looking at this in a very sophisticated way because there's no way for industry to be able to take advantage of this in any sort of meaningful way until the specifications and characterization of the process are put into place. So one of the interesting things that happened right away was there was a sort of a geographic discrepancy in how some of the 3D printers were actually laying the plastic down, which was causing odd results. So they had to first narrow down how to actually print the parts, which from my perspective, I figured that was already done. Like, okay, here's a part. It's always going to be made the same way each time. No, that is indeed not the case. And so, but I do hope at the end of this that there will be a paper, a study, information that can go out to the 10,000 or so machine shops that are present in the United States all across the country that will allow them an opportunity to be able to make these quick, easy forms. The other part that I really like about this is that there's so many new companies out there and it's so expensive to get started. And so if there's a quick and easy way to make prototypes through this new method of 3D printing form breaks, then that could have, an exponential effect on new product development here. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Nagesh, I want to turn back to you. The MEP network has a substantial impact on the U.S. manufacturing sector. How do you measure the success of the network's initiatives, particularly in terms of the technology adoption and commercialization?
We have over 1,400 manufacturing experts and work with 2,100 partners, for example, and we have 460 service locations. The idea is to have an MEP center within a 2-3 hour drive, maximum radius, and so we ensure that the network, that the manufacturers that are out there, and we service and support over 30,000 plus manufacturers, that they have opportunity to engage and work with those MEP centers of excellence. And we've worked with the centers to do a robust review of their performance indicators and impact on how they're servicing and are servicing clients effectively and appropriately.
David, considering your experience with various commercialization plans, what do you think are some of the most common pitfalls that manufacturers encounter when trying to bring new technologies to market?
Well, we kind of mentioned it before, time. Things always take longer than you think they're going to do. I think that a lot of manufacturers also are generally trying to do it alone, and they don't recognize the value of partnerships. They could be using MEP more. They could be reaching out to the universities more. They could be, collaborating with their vendors more. I mean, this is, somewhat of a, I'm not sure if it's a new concept, but in consulting, there's this idea of being vulnerable and making it clear to your partners what it is that you need in order to be successful. And, finding the right people that are interested in your success. Obviously, it's helpful if that's a vendor who's supplying you, but there could be other individuals in your network that are interested in having you be, the right people. I talk to lots of companies and they're just not aware of MEPs. They're not aware of university-sponsored research, or they think it's really hard. They know of a couple of labs, but they don't know how to get started. They aren't familiar with the SBIR program. They aren't really familiar with what SBA has to offer. I mean, there's really just, you'd think with, I don't know how many years of people really working hard to get things out there, they just don't know the resources that are available, or they're unsure how to get engaged, or they're just a little bit, they don't feel comfortable revealing their early stage. And I think there's also this culture, certainly with new products of, trying to be the next, this e-myth of trying to form a .com company and, cash out billions of dollars. And, that's just not the way things work. And, particularly in manufacturing, it's really tough business. When you've got cost of goods sold, I mean, it's really difficult to scale at that level. And so there's a disconnect in, I think, some of the way the media is lifting up certain companies. I'd love to see, more stories about, just the meat and potatoes. When was the last time I saw a story about a machinist shop, doing great work?
You don't, because it's not what people unfortunately find interesting. It's like you said, it's meat and potatoes, it's vanilla. And what people want is something that's, different, interesting. So to your point, yeah, that's the problem. We don't hear about those stories anymore. It's
absolutely right. And David kind of hit on something that's been an important thing I've been pushing on for years. When you think of manufacturing, it goes across the gambit of low tech to deep tech.
Exactly. Yeah.
Meat and potato production, which actually is pretty impressive science in the agriculture and food manufacturing world. It's not easy science, all the way to semiconductor manufacturing. And it's funny, you mentioned SBIR. I used to help oversee the SBIR program from the SBA years ago. And SBIR.gov was one of my great products that I put out. Besides the SBIR program policy changes, everything that we did there back in the early 2010s, 2012 time period of time. But what folks don't realize is that the federal government is a labyrinth, and it's a mysterious labyrinth. And so folks like David are sorely needed because they can help demystify and make it a lot more easy to work through the federal apparatus, which is quite complicated. It is daunting. I saw it when I went from SBR world to IT management world. Winning an IT, government contract is a quite arduous and daunting process. It's not easy. And it's the same with SBIR grants and contracts. Winning one of those grants and contracts is a very arduous process. It is not easy. There's a lot of compliance, a lot of financial regulations, auditing you have to, adhere to, a lot of controls in place. And so I can see why a lot of people get a little nervous if you're not used to or engaged with, working with the federal government. It can be a very scary process in the beginning. And so, part of the thing I'm trying to do with my team too is how do we demystify and how to make it easier. And that's what MEP centers do, is make it easier for small, medium-sized manufacturers to leverage federal assets and opportunities, federal, state, and local, and help with that de-risking, right? De-risking of services, de-risking of of concerns, de-risking of technology. All of that is about risk mitigation and de-risking. But I think one thing that's been very clear is that we, the federal government, could do a better job also of making it easier to work with the federal government and making sure it's not scary. And you're absolutely right. I worked for a social media meets clean tech company back in 2010, 2011, 12 timeframe, right before it failed miserably. I was in LA. And then later on, I got recruited into SBIR world at SBA back in 2014 timeframe and went from there. So, sorry, SBIR, when I said SBIR.gov back in 2012, it was actually 2014 when I took on the project and built it out. But when I was working for this social media company, it was trying to be a clean tech company working on mature clean tech, which is very capital intensive. And we were trying to play this social media angle. And it was because social media was the rage. It was the sexiest thing. People were trying to get their quick cash cow. And they're not realizing that it's a lot of hard work. And especially with a lot of the tech companies out in the Bay Area and whatnot, everyone has that allure. There is some notion of federal support for a lot of those companies that most folks don't realize, whether it was SBIR funded or, in the case of Tesla, they benefited from the DOE energy loan program. But most folks don't realize that. I remember when Elon Musk, I was there at the conference at RPE Summit where Elon Musk came on stage. And I think it was Cheryl Martin at the time, may have been Ari Mudgenberger. He was like, oh, yeah, he was bragging and talking about how awesome the DOE energy loan program that Nagesh Rao oversees right now. And I'm kind of going, there's an entrepreneur we all, everyone, lauds over and says, he's creator of Tesla, SpaceX, but he had to use federal resources to get his company too. David, what's your thoughts on that? If I'm wrong.
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of, lift the federal government has done for many companies. They don't always advertise it, but, if you look at any large aerospace company, they benefit tremendously from the work that's going on. They know how to use the federal government. Here in Portland, where I am, it's different than being on the right coast because it's just not as known. We don't have as many federal labs nearby. We're more spread out. We don't have as many universities just per geography, and it is a little mystifying. And I certainly find in my practice, and it's what is most necessary is just someone to say. It isn't like fatherly, like it'll be okay, we can get through this. It's just like, let's just go do this. It's gonna happen. Literally just yesterday, I'm working through the SBIR portal for DoD for a company. And I'm not providing what I would consider to be the most high value work that I can do. Like, I'm not taxing my, the intellectual assets that I've created over the years. All I'm doing is like, okay, here's the next step. Let's go do this now. And that's something we should do at the end. And, there are other groups that are out there that can also do this. I mean, there are Apex accelerators, which are funded, by the DoD out of the Office of Small Business, which formerly called Procurement Technology Assistance Centers. Nagesh mentioned SBDCs. I mean, at some point, the company needs to reach out. I mean, they need to know. So you asked me earlier, what's the biggest thing? Well, they don't know to reach out. If they can just get to that first person, and that person can then get them to the next, there's just lots of opportunities that are out there. And yeah, the processes are complicated, but if you've got a good person who can just help you know what to do next, I think it's very possible.
Just guide through the process. That's where it seems to be the biggest issue, that people just don't know where to get started and how to get started and how to move on.
And the federal government does a really good job, actually, in funding those risky R&D ventures. I mentioned Solar City, by the way, from Moscow, Solar City, Tesla, and SpaceX. And I remember he benefited from some of those federal, funding opportunities to help start some of those projects up. And 23andMe also got some federal funding, but there are a lot of deep tech and Biogen was the one I was thinking about, really. Biogen, even Qualcomm, they all got, those are deep tech companies of the sort that got their early start days with some support from the federal government in some shape or form, SBIR being a critical one. But, the Federal Lab Consortium does a lot of really good work, too, of trying to tap into the federal apparatus of innovative technologies that are there coming out of federal labs, and trying to find viable ways to allow for that applied technology solutions to go to market and not just sit on the shelf language. The federal government's trying to say, hey, look, we have great science coming out of and technology coming out of our labs. How do we figure out ways to unlock it and unleash it for the general public to use and consume, for their venture, apparatuses? And I commend the FLC for trying to do that. Dave, you work very closely with FLC.
Building on that, I just want to say that, getting the technology match, I mean, as Autumn members know, I always describe it as a four-dimensional temporal problem. You got to find technology that's neither too early nor too late, and a company that is neither too new nor too old, right? Just too calcified. And so I think the best way for all of these things is through CRADAs and sponsored research agreements, or just having conversations about how to move, technologies forward. There was a great study that was done by TechLink a couple of years ago, which I think they're continually updating. And as I was able to parse the data, it showed more or less that having a CRADA I think they were looking at Air Force CRADAs, looking at these Air Force CRADAs, that had a direct, pretty fine, straight line to $3 million of non-defense, non-government revenue. So commercial revenue as a result of finding the answer. But that was the small business number. If you looked at large businesses, it was ridiculous. It was not useful numbers for small businesses. But the other part about that is that included a lot of projects that were not ever going to go anywhere. I don't know exactly what they were, but there were a bunch of zeros, just didn't result in anything, because that's the way research is. So however, if you were to remove, I'm not sure if those are outliers per se, but if you were to remove all of the outliers, what that shows is that these sorts of research partnerships, taking advantage of the capabilities and the stored up intellectual capital of these institutions, and again, you could translate that over to universities just as well, is incredibly high ROI. So, don't try and do everything yourself. Find the right partner, work with an institution, and then once you're in the door with a CRADA sponsored research agreement or other type of arrangement, you've made that personal connection. You have the relationships, and that's the gift that keeps on giving. Right? Now you know where to go.
So I'm curious, question for the two of you. Where do you think the MEP National Network is going to go in the next 5 years? How do you think its role is going to evolve, especially with all the new emerging technologies that are coming out?
I think it will always be a relevant go-to source of excellence for those who are wishing to engage in and work in the manufacturing space. There's much necessity for it. And it's just going to continue to grow and evolve with the consortium of various centers of excellence in the innovation ecosystem. You can't, as a small or medium-sized manufacturer, if we as a country and we have a big push for make it in America ethos, that promise and that ability and those capabilities cannot happen without being in concert with the MEP National Network and the MEP program being available as a resource. And it's a tried and tested and effective resource for a lot of small, medium-sized manufacturers. And it will continue to evolve as technology changes happens. It's just going to continue to evolve with it. And we have and evidence of that is just the continued growth and changeover of the new MEP center directors that are coming online. They're coming online. A lot of new center directors are coming online in the last couple of years, and they're all very versed in some shape or form with technology and acutely aware of the importance of technology and innovation as being part of their service offerings for an MEP center to be effective and efficient.
David, curious on your thoughts about its evolution and the work that you do, for example, with the federal labs over the next few years.
The role is going to become is always important. I think because technology is accelerating, and also I think because of the nature of a lot of small manufacturing facilities, it's part of a generational transition at the present time. So there's a lot of people that have been doing things the way they've been doing them for a long time. They've made their capital investment. They're kind of, they work from a position of scarcity. And so they don't make the investments to move forward because they don't understand how that's going to actually help them in the long run. And again, like we said before, they're very focused on, next quarter, making payroll, just making sure the lights stay on. Whereas MEP has the vantage point to be able to, and responsibility, it's their job, to be able to review, all the things that are happening and be able to present a distilled menu of options. Because, the one of the major problems is like, okay, what do I choose? I mean, in a lot of ways, it may not matter exactly which CRM you choose, but someone needs to help you cull the herd down from too many to 3, right? Because that's all the person can handle on a given day because they've got all these other things to do. MEP is great at doing that. And that's just the simple thing. And there are going to be steps like that all along the way. And that doesn't include these crazy, software and material and processing transitions, everything from going from, milling to 3D printing, from simple computer systems to using machine learning and AI feedback. I mean, those things are, really starting to take hold, and the companies that are able to use those things will be more successful than the ones that aren't. And so I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out if they can sort of hold their breath and retire before it all comes to bear. But then there are, those owners' kids who are maybe taking over the position, along with this generational transition that's happening at the center director level at MEP. Then I think things are going to accelerate. It's going to be really exciting. I mean, we haven't talked at all about the Manufacturing USA Institutes, which are administratively managed by NIST. Like universities, like federal labs, they're taking federal funding. They're creating a non-competitive, sandbox for companies to come together to move forward in industry initiatives. For those of you who are familiar with the Fraunhofer Institutes in Germany, this is our attempt to try and duplicate that $1 trillion opportunity. Great first step. Continue to add resources all the time. A great way to find answers. Those things are challenging for small manufacturers to get access to. They have their membership organizations. Some of them have pretty high bars. However, they're still full of well-meaning people that have a lot of the same sort of intellectual capital stored up. And you can ask questions and get things answered and move on with your day on your process. And then come back to it. If we have time for an example, I'd be happy to.
Oh, yeah, please go ahead. I would love to hear an example. Yeah.
one of my favorite examples that really used so much of the MEP and Manufacturing USA system was MEP received a request seeking a source of high pressure steam in order to serve some unknown purpose. That's really all it came in as. It was a supply chain request. The MEP Advanced Technology Team picked that up as a possible project. We ended up talking to the MEP center that was in charge of that company. It turned out what they were looking for was some equipment that they would use to dissociate hydrogen from natural gas, steam reforming process. So there's an entire institute focused on modular manufacturing and process intensification called RAPID, located in New York. So we contacted the CTO of that organization. They were aware of a company that was in Virginia that had similar type of work that was happening, and thought they might have had some equipment that was mothballed. We then tried to contact the company. The startup tried to contact the company, no luck. So then we turned to our MEP brethren in Virginia to be able to get access. Oh yeah, sure, we know that company. And then we were able to get a meeting. And so now that asset is now part of what this startup needs to be able to go seek funding to be able to prove out this new technology. And again, now we're done with that because we don't have we've solved our problem. So the company now has responsibility of moving that forward. But, none of that would have happened in your standard, like, hey, why don't you go give Bob a call? I mean, it was all about contact. It was all about establishing the relationship. It was all about monitoring the process, making sure that, we maintained a certain level of control or just awareness of what was happening. And then we were able to, see that project to fruition. Where it goes, that's a story for the next chapter.
So as the podcast comes to a close, I wanted to ask the two of you, what advice would you give to tech transfer professionals who want to get more involved with the MEP network and support their local manufacturers?
I'd say connect with your local MEP center or MEP center constituents area, right? Like connect with the local one or regionally connect with them and grow a relationship with them. Have them in your MEP center sort of toolkit for helping support viable business opportunities and solutions in the manufacturing space, especially for credible and viable technology transfer and commercialization, for sure. That's what I recommend anyone who's in Autumn. Look, when I worked at the RPA Tech Transfer Office, we made sure to know all the different resources that were available to RPI internally and externally that we could tap into to help the university students and the professors, seek out and achieve their entrepreneurial manufacturing dreams.
Yeah, I couldn't add much more to that, except I will say NIST.gov/MEP will be your resource for trying to figure out, which center is in your neighborhood and how to contact them. And let me just propose this, make a phone call instead of sending an email, like talk to somebody. Make the relationship, because it's just so difficult. There's so much going on, and to be able to, capture it all in a couple of paragraphs before our mind wanders is a challenge. I mean, we've just spent, an hour perhaps talking about this concept, and we just scratched the surface on what is out there. So I really think that, if you haven't established, if there's no one in your office who's established a relationship with someone in the MEP center, fix that problem. That's, kind of on you. I mean, it's you have I think a responsibility, honestly, to your stakeholders, to your licensee partners, and you know what? Reach out to them. Reach out to your licensee partners and see how things are going. Ask one of those questions. Ask them to be vulnerable. See if they have an issue that might be resolvable, because it's a lot easier to establish that relationship with some true project. And then you're gonna have a success story. And then you can tell that story to everybody else. And from there, the snowball just keeps going.
And I think that's a great way to end. And David and Nagesh, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a really great conversation. I think we're going to have you back on to dig deeper, because we just, like you said, David, scratched the surface about MEP and the MEP National Network. Thank you both so much for all your time and expertise today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nagesh and David, for joining us today and sharing your insights on the MEP National Network and the critical role it plays in U.S. manufacturing. For our listeners, I hope today's conversation has provided you with valuable insights into how you can engage more effectively with the manufacturing. Sorry, I'm going to start that again. It was a long sentence. For our listeners, I hope today's conversation has provided you with valuable insights into how you can engage more effectively with the manufacturing sector through the resources and partnerships available via one more time, Luke. For our listeners, I hope today's conversation has provided you with valuable insights into how you can engage more effectively with the manufacturing sector through the resources and partnerships available via the MEP Network. If you're interested in learning more or getting involved, reach out to your local MEP If you're interested in learning more or getting involved, reach out to your local MEP center or visit the NIST MEP website. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of Autumn on the Air.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at AUTM.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.